Do you want to know what books I read during the second half of August? Well, stick around for part 2 of my August month-end wrap-up. Well, hey friends, Roger here, and welcome to my channel, Roger's Reads. So today I'm doing my August month-end wrap-up, which is part 2 of my monthly wrap-up, which I always divided into 2 parts. The first part during the middle of the month, and the last part during the beginning of the following month. But it covers all the books that I read during the month of August. So during the last half of August, I read 6 books. And the first book is entitled Tin Man, written by Sarah Winman. So Tin Man it's actually a book I got from the library, so I don't have a physical copy of it. But Tin Man is an emotional, character-driven story that opens in the 1960s and follows our 2 protagonists, Alice and Michael, who have been friends since they were childhood. But somewhere along the line, the friendship between these 2 boys grew into something a little bit more. So then the novel fast forwards to the 1990s, and we learn that Alice is married to a woman named Annie, and Michael is out of the picture. So now we're wondering, what in the hell happened? So shifting back and forth between past and present, the author fills in the blanks complete with agonizing pining, multiple tragedies, and even death, rendering this a genuinely heart-wrenching story. You know, I've seen this book referred to as almost a love story, and I feel that that's an excellent description for it because it is definitely not a romance. But it is a profound exploration of the strong bonds of friendship. So the first half of the book is told from Alice's point of view, and the second is told from Michael's as they drift in and out of each other's lives. So I felt that the dual perspective really added a depth and richness to the story as we experience both of their viewpoints in relation to the events in their lives. Now, I will say that there really isn't much of a plot or a storyline here, but rather, Tin Man is more of an in-depth, introspective character study / memoir of 2 people and the bittersweet, complex story of their lives, their loves, and their losses. The story is at times dreamy and ethereal, almost haunting in places as we flow in and out of each of the characters' lives. So in this regard, I found it quite atmospheric and evocative. Now, Tin Man is quite a short book, so I really can't say too much about it without delving into spoiler territory. But even though it is short, it packs a considerable punch. It's a tender, beautiful tale of a first love with lush lyrical writing that will no doubt break your heart in places. It did mine anyway. Because the story deals with some hard-hitting topics such as grief, longing, loss, sadness, regret, and loneliness. Now, it is worth mentioning that there are no quotation marks used in this novel, nor are there any real chapter breaks. So that, along with switching back and forth between the past and the present, which isn't always distinctive, might prove to be challenging for some folks. It definitely took a little bit of getting used to. But still, if you enjoy meandering, character-driven novels, then I feel that Tin Man is well worth a read, as it is a beautiful, deeply emotional story that deals with many important topics, such as a friendship, a desire, fitting in, family, and of course, grief and loss. So, there's really so much going on here for such a small book. And I don't think that it's a story that I'll forget about anytime soon. So, next up is a book entitled Seance on a Summer's Night, written by Josh Lanyon. So, Seance on a Summer's Night follows theater critic Artemis, who is summoned by his aunt Halcyon to come to the Green Lantern Inn, which is her home in California. So when Artie arrives, he learns the reason for her request. Aunt Halcyon is having ghost problems, and she believes that her house is haunted. In fact, the ghosts have frightened away off all of the guests, and because of that, the inn is beginning to fall into disrepair. Now, Halcyon is convinced that it's her late husband, Ogden, who was killed in a car crash the year before, who is haunting her and the inn. Now, Artie is a skeptic and does not believe in ghosts. Yet, right after his arrival, he notices strange happenings, such as footsteps walking on the floor above him at night when there's nobody there. And then there's Ogden's distraught sister, Aliana, who lives in the inn as well, who spends her days alone in her room with reading tarot cards, insisting on hosting regular seances with the aid of a local psychic medium / spiritualist named Roma Loveridge to communicate with her brother. So Artie reluctantly joins in these seances, and as it turns out, the seances are quite creepy. Yet Artie still isn't convinced that they're legit and not a hoax of some kind. Now, though everybody else in the house believes the place is haunted, Artie is not buying it, and he is determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, especially once the so-called ghost threatens his aunt. And he is certain that it is the living and not the dead who is behind these strange occurrences. Though, because of the accusations made by the ghost, Artie can't help but begin to wonder whether his staunch Aunt Halcyon may have had something to do with his uncle's death after all. Okay, so I'm a massive fan of the haunted house trope, and this one did not disappoint. It had all of the classic elements of a gothic ghost story. There's a psychic medium, creepy and hostile housekeepers, a mysterious and hunky gardener, dim lighting, strange noises, an enormous old house, secret passageways, possible murder, and of course, ghostly apparitions. Now, what's funny about this story is that it had an old-time Gothic feel to it, though it takes place in modern times. Actually, I kept forgetting that it takes place in modern times rather than the 1920s or 1930s. And when I did, I found the modern references kind of jarring in places. So that being said, because of the descriptions and dialogue, the story might have worked really well were it set in an earlier time period. But I really did enjoy the mystery and loved journeying along with this oddball set of characters as the pieces of the puzzle slowly fit into place. I also loved all the clues peppered throughout the story that made figuring out the mystery all the more fun. Now, Josh Lanyon is known for writing male-male romance novels. But, as is typical with most of her romance novels, the romance is secondary to the mystery, and that was certainly the case here. The romance definitely takes a back seat to the ghost story plot, so if you're looking for a steamy gay romance, you really won't find that here. What you will find, however, is a fun, cozy mystery featuring a witty and sarcastic protagonist, a zany cast of well-thought-out secondary characters with plenty of secrets, and a good amount of flirting between the two male leads. There are also several laugh-out-loud scenes as well, which added to the lightheartedness / coziness of the story. So all in all, Seance on a Summer's Night is a smart and original cozy mystery / gay romance with a rapidly moving plot, irresistible characters, and a good number of twists that kept me engaged throughout. And I actually received this as an advanced reader copy from NetGalley in exchange for an honest opinion. So the next book that I read was entitled No Exit, written by Taylor Adams. So I tend to love stories where people are stranded together, cut off from the rest of the world with a villain in their midst. So in this novel about a group of travelers stuck together at a rest stop during a blizzard came to my attention. I knew I had to read it. So No Exit is a super creepy, edgy, heart-in-your-throat thrill ride that follows a main character, Darby Thorne, who gets caught in a savage blizzard in the Colorado mountains. When she's no longer able to navigate the roads, she's forced to wait out the storm at a rest stop along with 4 other strangers whom she meets when she arrives. So at some point, she steps outside hoping to get a cell signal in order to call her family and let them know what's going on with her, but there is no signal. So she's walking by one of the vehicles in the parking lot. She glances through the window and to her horror sees a little girl locked in a dog crate inside the vehicle. Okay, so now Darby realizes that one of the 4 people inside is a kidnapper, maybe even worse. But she has no choice but to act, because this is something she cannot simply ignore. So she's determined to somehow save the little girl. And she has to do it without tipping off the kidnapper and getting everybody else in the rest area killed in the process. Of course, she'll need to first figure out who the kidnapper is and whether any of her fellow travelers can be trusted enough to ask for help in freeing the girl. So as it turns out, there's a hell of a lot more going on with her fellow strandees than meets the eye. Now, she also quickly learns that nothing is as it seems, and everyone in the room has secrets, which are 2 of my favorite tropes. Also, trust no one. So this story really takes off with a bang and does not let up until the final jaw-dropping pages. To say it's fast-paced is an understatement, as our protagonist finds herself in one harrowing and deadly situation after another. You know, I love the speed and pacing of this story as it hurtles along at breakneck speed and really never gives you the opportunity to even catch your breath. There's also a plethora of surprising and shocking twists and turns, most of which I did not see coming. And let me tell you, the first one was a doozy. So yeah, definitely some brilliant storytelling here as the author continuously ratcheted up the tension page after page after page. Okay, so I do need to mention that I was quite surprised by how violent, bloody, and gory the novel was. Something that kind of caught me off guard. I didn't expect it. Let's just say I'll never be able to look at a nail gun again without thinking about this story, and I'll leave it at that. So that being said, this may not be a novel for those who dislike violence and or are particularly squeamish, and some might find it exceptionally gruesome. But yeah, Dark Exit. It's a dark, edgy, intense, and claustrophobic game of cat and mouse in an absolutely chilling setting with an absolutely chilling villain. You know, I've always found rest stops a tad creepy anyway, so this book really reinforced that feeling. I also thought the author did an excellent job with Darby's character, our main protagonist here. I enjoyed seeing her character evolve throughout the story. She went from being a rather self-centered person to someone who would risk her life for a stranger. So all in all, this was a highly suspenseful, nail-biting psychological thriller that leaves you with one simple question: what would you do? So yeah, definitely gave this one 5 stars. Okay, so I read another thriller this month, and this one was The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. And I talked about this a bit in my last haul because this was last month's Book of the Month Club selection, of August's Book of the Month Club selection. And I couldn't wait to read it, so I bumped something else off my TBR and read this one instead. So Turn the Key. It's a gothic-style thriller about a nannying position that has gone terribly, terribly wrong. The story is told in epistolary format and follows a young, potentially murderous woman named Rowan Kane, who is writing to an attorney named Mr. Wrexham She's writing to him from prison in the hopes that he'll represent her. As we learn, she's charged with murdering one of the children in her care. So through her letters, Rowan recounts her story about what really happened, according to her, and all the events leading up to it. Now, how it all began was that Rowan spotted an ad for a live-in nanny position offering an unbelievably generous salary. So when she arrives at the Heatherbray house for an interview, she finds a large, secluded, Gothic-style home situated and sheltered in a remote Scottish countryside. But though the house is Gothic on the outside, the house is in fact a smart home with everything from the lights to the locks to the appliances all controlled via an app. So here I thought the blend of a Victorian-style house fully equipped with modern smart devices lent an extra bit of intrigue to the story, especially once we get the Gothic horror element combined with the modern gadgets. Hint, it was horrifying. It's as if the house had a split personality. So think of the Addams Family mansion equipped with Google Home, Alexa, and Siri, all on steroids. Now, Rowan also learns that several recent nannies have left, for the past year in fact, because of their belief that the house was haunted. So the question is, what could have driven off so many nannies? But it's no matter to Rowan. The salary is too generous to pass up, and she's determined to get this job. So get the job she does, and Rowan finds herself the nanny of 4 children ranging from 18 months to 14 years old, though the 14-year-old is away at school. So when she arrives at the house, she's more than surprised to discover that she is to be immediately left alone with the children for at least a week while the parents are out of town, meaning that she doesn't even have a chance to become acclimated to her new environment or even get to know the children. So it's going to be her alone with the kids. But she's sure she can handle it because, after all, what could possibly go wrong? So then, strange things begin to happen, things that very well could be supernatural in nature, such as malfunctioning smart devices, cold spots, creaking floors, missing belongings, and disappearing keys. So as the story unfolds, we also learn that Rowan isn't completely innocent here, and she arrives at the house with her own set of secrets. So there was quite a desperate and claustrophobic feeling to this story as Rowan struggled to understand the smart home's various controls, panels, switches, and apps, completely cut off from the rest of the world. I also find the idea of being under constant surveillance in every room of the house to be a tad unsettling, as well as being in charge of mistrusting and openly hostile children. You know, there were so many delightful plot twists and red herrings in the story, most of which I did not see coming, and I did not see the ending coming at all. It's an unnerving and unsettling story that really picked up even more during the second half, once Rowan's terror begins to escalate and escalate and escalate. Hell, it certainly sent my heart racing several times as I white-knuckled my way through this harrowing sequence of events. I thought that the author did a masterful job of layering on all the twisty intrigue and mysteries until the reader is almost frantically turning the page, impatient to find out what in the hell is going on. So yeah, this was another 5-star read for me. So the next book that I read this month was entitled Mainly by Moonlight, written by Josh Lanyon. So yes, this is the second Josh Lanyon book I've read this month. And I read it in ebook format, so I don't have a physical copy. So I've enjoyed several of Josh's books. Josh is pretty much an author for me. And I was really excited that she was writing a paranormal series, which is quite a departure from her usual style of mystery stories. Or at least those books by her that I haven't read. So given that I love books about witches, magic, and murder, I was really excited about this one. So Mainly by Moonlight is the first novel in the Bedknobs and Broomsticks trilogy and follows our main characters Cosmo Seville and Police Commissioner John Galbraith, who are busy planning their wedding. But Cosmo is keeping a huge, massive secret from his fiancée, and that is Cosmo is a witch, and he is descended from a family of witches. Now things take a turn for the worst when Cosmo's longtime rival, Seamus Rytherman, I think his name was, also a witch, is murdered, and Cosmo ends up being the sole suspect in the case. There's also a question of a missing grimoire, which is a book of spells, that belongs to Cosmo's family, which the murdered man may or may not have had in his possession. So now Cosmo has to clear his name and find the missing grimoire, all the while keeping his and his family's true nature a secret from John, his fiancé, and the police force who are investigating the murder. So I really like how different Cosmo and John are from each other. They're literally from two different worlds, which really added to the intrigue in the story. Now what was strange about this story was that the two of them had only known each other for 2 weeks, and they're getting married in a few days. And yes, I did say 2 weeks. And their wedding is coming up, and I think it's just in a couple of days. So this is insta-love to the extreme. And I thought the entire idea was so unrealistic that I had a difficult time buying into it, especially given that the two of them hardly know anything about each other. And it's also worth mentioning that John's feelings for Cosmo might have been the result of a love spell which has now been removed. So Cosmo has serious doubts about John's true feelings for him and has resolved to only marry John if he can convince himself that John really does love him. And that also added to the interest and intrigue of the story. So Cosmo actually goes to great lengths to convince himself of the authenticity of John's feelings, which still really weren't fully resolved at the end of the book. Now, I did enjoy the tension, though, as Cosmo was convinced that John would call off the wedding at any moment now that the spell had been removed. Okay, so we've determined the fact that John's feelings might have been the result of a love spell. So, what was Cosmo's excuse for wanting to marry a man he's only known for 2 weeks? Pure insta-love. That's the only explanation I can come up with. Actually, the degree of the suspension of disbelief that's needed to be okay with this 2-week whirlwind romance to wedding was a little bit much, in my humble opinion. It was also quite difficult to believe that these two are planning an elegant, high society wedding and moving into a new home all within this 2-week period. But all that aside, I did find this to be a lot more lighthearted than some of Lanyon's other mysteries, and I had quite a bit of fun working my way through it. There were several nods to the television show Bewitched in the novel, with John even referring to Cosmo's mother as Endora, which was cute, even though John had no idea that Cosmo's mother really was a witch. Now, given that this is the beginning of a series, I expected some dangling plot threads. I was disappointed, however, that the series ended up on more or less of a cliffhanger, with none of the plot points in the story resolved, leaving the reader with more questions than answers. That is to say, the mystery really wasn't solved in the story, which I found frustrating, and felt that the conclusion was more or less unsatisfying, leaving me with a meh type of feeling. The story also had a happy for now ending, given that there was no real communication to speak of between John and Cosmo, and that they're basically entering into a marriage based on lies, which completely rubbed me the wrong way. So I'm guessing and hoping that a lot of this will be resolved in the remaining books in the series, and I look forward to seeing how things progress. So yes, I do plan on continuing with the next book when it comes out. Now, it may sound as though I disliked this book, but you know, that's not entirely true. I thought it was a fun and charming, cozy mystery with a touch of magic, but the lack of a real ending dropped it an entire star for me. I did enjoy the intrigue and drama between John and Cosmo, as well as the mystery surrounding the murder. So yeah, I thought that this was a good opening novel to a new series, and I look forward to gaining additional insight into the characters in future books. I also enjoyed the world that the author created here, in which we have the blending of witches and mortals, and look forward to more adventures in this world. So though I found the book to be only okay, I did enjoy it and look forward to book 2. Hopefully she'll remember to finish this one. And the last book that I read during the month was entitled, this is entitled A Sword of Summer, which is the first book in the Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard series written by Riordan. And I believe that there are 3 of them, so this is a trilogy. And I've been wanting to get to this for a long time, and I'm so happy I finally did. So this follows 16-year-old Magnus Chase, who is living on the streets after his mother was killed in her apartment by a giant wolf. I know, right? So Magnus's uncle Randolph finds him on the streets, catches up with him, and starts rambling on about Norse history and the Sword of Summer, which is a weapon that's been lost for thousands of years, and that this weapon is supposedly Magnus's birthright. So then Magnus dies. And that's when his life, or afterlife as it were, really gets interesting. Especially once he discovers that he has 7 days to save the world. That is 7 days to stop Ragnarok from beginning. Okay, I won't lie. I love books and stories about Norse mythology. And I was so happy when I learned that Riordan's series is about just that. So in this book, we get to meet all manner of our favorite and quirky Norse deities. There's Odin, Thor, Frey, Freya, Hel, and even our beloved Loki, the god of lies. There's also encounters with Ratatusk, the dreaded squirrel who guards the tree, the world tree, as well as the wolf of Fenris, Valkyries, giants, soothsayers, and more. So needless to say, this was really a fun romp, and I adored this book, and I adored the character of Magnus Chase. This book also had extremely compelling and well-developed secondary characters, such as Hearthstone the Elf, there's Blitzen the Dwarf, and Sam the Valkyrie. So they were all just as delightful as Magnus, in my opinion. So I know that this book has been out several years, or this series has been out several years now, so I'm not going to blather on too much more about it. But if you enjoy Norse myths or would like to learn more about them and have not read this trilogy, then you may want to check out Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard. The author really brings the Norse myths to life in this, at least in this book, and I cannot wait to delve into book 2. So in Percy Jackson, we had the Greek gods, and here we have the Norse gods. And I believe the author explores the Egyptian gods in the Kane Chronicles, which is another one of Mr. Riordan's series. So I'll have to check out that next. I actually have it on my shelf back there. So that is it for this month's month-end wrap-up. What did you read in August? Let me know in the comments. As always, I thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate all of your support. And if you like this video, I'd really appreciate if you click the like button below, as it really helps me out. And that about does it. I will talk to you all in the next video. Roger and out.